morning and welcome to Our Issues Milwaukee. I'm your host, Andrea Williams. Our focus this morning is on homelessness. According to a report from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, in Wisconsin, there's an estimated 5,000 people who are considered homeless, but progress is being made against traditional homelessness. As of January of 2018, the number of people in shelters or living on the street has dropped by nearly half in Milwaukee County in the last decade, but the fight to end homelessness on every level continues. My first guest has dedicated her life to homeless outreach and advocacy. She's a nationally recognized homeless advocate and currently serves as the president of the MacCanon Brown Homeless Sanctuary. Good morning, MacCanon.
Happy to be here.
Thank you for being here. And of course, I should say welcome back to the show. It was about 4 years ago that you were here. So I'm anxious to hear an update on where we are with the MacCanon Brown Homeless Sanctuary.
Well, we began the new context, the new chapter, this organization, 5 years ago with nothing. We began with no resources, no people, and it is definitely thriving. We have been witness to and part of an amazing synergy, not just around this incredible facility that we have and own debt-free at 24th Place and Center, but the organization, the infrastructure, the impact we're already having as we prepare to begin to use that facility in much more of a maximum scope way. It's just been incredible. We're talking about over 600 volunteers, partnerships with 50 faith communities, interfaith faith communities, and impacts on at least 2,000 people in a year already, even though we are just now claiming to get occupancy of the first floor. So there's just a lot that has been happening. Every day is exciting. And what we witness is that we are engaging people who think beyond themselves as usual. That's what it takes. It's the people who are willing to think beyond themselves and say, yes, I want to be a part of this, and know it's bigger than ourselves. Something happens that's bigger than ourselves that explains how all this can be taking place when we started with nothing.
Yes, you started from ground level, and now you're here talking about really just going into the facility and doing what you do best. You are a daytime sanctuary, which I feel in Wisconsin is extremely important because the majority of the shelters are all in a position where they open at like 5 o'clock in the evening, and there's only one or two that actually open during the daytime hours when there's extreme cold. People have a problem finding somewhere to go, but being a daytime shelter, that eliminates that problem.
We've always been that part of the safety net that's been missing, which is where does a person go during the daytime to work on their life situation? Because everyone wakes up in the morning wherever they have laid their head. They're still homeless in the morning when they wake up. So where do you go where there's not the pressures of the streets and there's not any negativity? It's a positive environment, and we provide all kinds of resources for people to work on their lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you talk about the negatives of the street, there's always that concern for safety. But then you talk about living in Milwaukee, where we deal with frigid temperatures more so than not, right?
Yes. Operating any kind of agency, serving the homeless in a northern city is very contrasting to the ones in, say, Los Angeles or Atlanta or so forth.
Yeah, but we also look at situations when the weather gets warmer. There are whole different issues that come about. What are some of the issues we look at during the warmer months?
Well, people die of heat stroke more than die of the cold.
Wow.
So being able, as we are hoping to have in just a few months here, an air-conditioned space, you know, being a cooling place for people. Also dehydration, because some people have no access to water during the night if they're not in a shelter or a facility.
Yeah, so your new building, the MacCanon Brown Homeless Sanctuary, again, is going to be at 2461 West Center Street. And I shouldn't say it's going to be, it is there.
It is there.
And you guys are ready to really move in the next couple of months, you say?
Yes. The first part of first floor will have us have the occupancy where we can expand the hours and add more staff and do even more than what we've been doing these 4 years as we prepare for this stage. And in the whole vision, it's all happening in different ways because there are all these moving parts, Andrea. And the one that is truly interesting is agriculture. We are listed with the city as a homeless community center, which is what we do really well. You'll remember being with my work in the past.
Oh yeah, for really like a couple of decades since I've lived in Milwaukee, I've been aware of you and your work and done whatever I could to help spread the word on how people can actually help make a difference. So when we talk about the face of homelessness, I think it's unfortunate, but some people think they know what homelessness looks like. There's that stereotype, and the truth is, like many things in life, it doesn't discriminate. Men are affected, women, children, people with degrees, it does not matter. And there are some people who are living right now a paycheck away from being homeless. So we talk about those individuals who, they call it couch surfing, and then they are living with their family and friends until things get better or they get on their feet, or they may have just lost their job, or any of these things, gotten a divorce. Everyone has their own story, and everybody's affected by this thing we call homelessness.
And it can happen to anyone, as you said. And what we see is, in Milwaukee, more of the population we call at risk of homelessness, but it's blended in with the people who are actually homeless, because the people who live in poverty are in and out of homelessness. The book Evicted, that's a bestseller based on Milwaukee, bears that out, that we can't put the people who live in poverty in one box and the people who are homeless in another. In my witness of 27 years, that is one whole blurry population. And when we look at the level of poverty in Milwaukee and how there is this hyper-segregated situation where there's such lack of resource and opportunity, that has a whole lot to do with homelessness. So we are very thankful that we're established right in the epicenter of the poorest area of Wisconsin, because it's a concentration of homeless and at-risk homeless people in that concentration of impoverished people.
Yeah, and with that said, you have a number of programs and services that you offer to individuals on a daily basis. Being a daytime shelter, you serve as a safe place, as we've talked about, so people are able to enjoy crafts, play some games like chess, dominoes, whatever the case. But then you also dig a little deeper and you offer the 12-step AA meetings. You provide nurses to help individuals out, and really this synergy you talk about is really forming relationships with resources in the community to help these individuals who are in need.
Have them owning the vision of all this and not have it be like this is some hierarchical system offering it, or that these are people who have a lot to do with delivering it and being part of it. The agriculture that we're going to be doing very large scale in this food desert of Wisconsin, we will be engaging our people a whole lot in all the stages of production, processing, and having that be on the table of our meal program. And so it's a really exciting aspect. It's part of what I've heard people, millennials, maybe you've heard them.
I'm not a millennial.
I know, but you know a lot of people. And one of the prophetic things I hear them saying is, that there's a reawakening that's needed in this world, and it can be happening now. And a lot of that is around new forms of doing things, like how to feed people.
And urban farming, we have talked about it many times on this show and how it really is helping change the narrative. So I think it's amazing that you're engaging in that concept. And MacCanon, before we run out of time, you've got a big event that's coming up. It's your 6th annual Peaceful July 4th picnic. Tell us about that.
It's for people who have no place to go in this whole city on July 4th. And we do it well. We'll have about 50 volunteers, and we expect between 300 and 400 people. We are going to have all kinds of food, give away food, feed people, clothing. We'll have toys. We'll have games for children. We'll have a magician this year.
Wow.
We'll have a clown as usual, but we have such a tremendous spirit, and we just spoil people who come to this picnic. We just lavish all kinds of gifts on them and have them have a very complete celebration of American life.
Yes, and that's what the 4th of July is all about. People coming together, fellowshipping, appreciating each other, and you're going to be barbecuing, of course. So you've got free food for the community that you serve from 11:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. on the 4th of July.
The meal.
The meal, okay, the meal. So this is just one of the.
It's from 9 till 4, though.
The whole picnic is from 9 until 4. That's important to point out. Thank you. So this is one of the many ways you're working to reverse poverty and homelessness in the 53206 zip code and citywide, for that matter. So you're looking for donations from individuals in the community. What are some of the things that they can donate leading up to this picnic?
Yes, we would appreciate bottled water. We expect to need and give away a lot of that. We are giving away baked goods, canned and boxed goods for people who are in poverty close by. We're giving out blankets and clothing, all kinds. We appreciate hygiene products especially.
Okay.
Those are hard to pay for homeless people, people who are displaced, and we appreciate any of those. We are not money driven, but of course all of this is needed to fund this. We just say, nourish what works. We have a long track record of making a tremendous impact on many people, and so we invite the people who do think outside of themselves to help nourish something good here.
Absolutely.
Like you do.
Oh, you're so sweet. Thank you. So I knew you were going to be here today, so I did pick up some bottled waters for the picnic. And then I also called my friends over at the West Dallas Dental Care and asked them if they happen to have some toothbrushes and toothpaste and other items, and they did not hesitate to donate those items. So we'll make sure you leave here today with those things.
Thank you for that.
All right, absolutely. So I just want to make sure for someone who's watching who wants to take part or drop off donations, where exactly will all of this be taking place?
2461 West Center Street, and we can give a phone number if people want to call ahead, 414-305-8997.
All right. Well, MacCanon, like I said, you've been doing great things in this community for a very long time, and I know I speak for a lot of people when I say thank you for all that you do.
Well, thank you so much.
All right. And thank you for being here today. It's always a pleasure. MacCanon Brown is the president of the MacCanon Brown Homeless Sanctuary. Again, it's located at 2461 West Center Street. Their website address is mbsanctuary.org, or you can give them a call at 414-305-8997. When we return to Our Issues Milwaukee, we'll continue discussing the subject of homelessness. We'll meet two ladies who work tirelessly to reach out to hundreds of the most vulnerable in our city on a daily basis. We'll meet the co-founders of the Street Angels Milwaukee Outreach Organization, Eva Welch and Shelley Saracen, right after this.